Diddy twin daughters hang back in Cali. Cared for by late mom's friend. Diddy's sons are in New York watching their father go through an indictment and court proceedings, but his teenage twin daughters are hanging back in California with a family friend. Sources familiar with the situation tell TMZ. Diddy's twin girls 17-year-old Delilah and 17-year-old Jessie are currently in Los Angeles under the care of their late mother Kim Porter's best friend, Lala. We're told Lala has acted as a caregiver for the girls for several years, though she is not a legal guardian. TMZ broke the story. Kim was found dead inside her Toluca Lake home in November 2018. Our sources say the girls are being schooled in LA and Lala oversees their day-to-day schedules. We're told Lala does her best to protect the girls and keep the outside noise away, and she acts as a mother figure. As we first reported, Diddy was arrested Monday in New York and indicted on sex trafficking, racketeering and kidnapping charges. He appeared in court Tuesday and pled not guilty, but is being held without bail. How long could Diddy spend in prison? Lawyer discusses severe charges, lengthy, possible sentence. Diddy's 3 adult sons, Quincy, Justin and Christian Combs showed up at the federal courthouse in Lower Manhattan to see him go before a judge for the first time. King is the twins' older brother, but the girls are hanging back in California, and our sources say they still support their father and are hopeful for his release. U.S. News. Former New York City prosecutor and criminal defense attorney Paul Callen weighed in on the serious charges Diddy Combs is facing in his sex trafficking and racketeering conspiracy trial. The charges against him are severe, Callen, who is not involved in the case, said to Us Weekly in an exclusive interview on Thursday, September 19. If convicted, he can expect to spend most of his remaining life behind bars. Federal prosecutors generally obtain guilty pleas or convictions after trial in more than 90% of the cases they bring. Diddy, 54, was arrested on Monday, September 16 in New York City after a grand jury indicted him following multiple sexual assault lawsuits in a federal investigation. The rapper, who pleaded not guilty, was denied bail and was remanded to stay at the Metropolitan Detention Center until his trial. A trial date for Diddy's case has not yet been scheduled, per deadline. Callen explained that Diddy's current situation in which he must remain in jail is unusual, since most federal criminal defendants are released on bond to await trial. Prosecutors presented a strong case to both federal judges that Combs was likely to flee and/or threaten witnesses in the case if released, he told us. In such cases, the federal courts will sustain pretrial incarceration. The lower court decision can be appealed, but I believe a reversal of the lower court order is unlikely. Callen explained that Diddy's current situation in which he must remain in jail is unusual since most federal criminal defendants are released on bond to await trial. Prosecutors presented a strong case to both federal judges that Combs was likely to flee and/or threaten witnesses in the case if released, he told us. In such cases, the federal courts will sustain pretrial incarceration. The lower court decision can be appealed, but I believe a reversal of the lower court order is unlikely. However, the attorney, who has been practicing law in New York City for the last 3 decades, believes that Diddy's case is likely to move quickly through the court system because of the seriousness of the charges. Callen also shared that while a life sentence is theoretically possible for Diddy, it is highly unlikely, since there were no deaths involved. That said, given the severity of the charges, a lengthy jail sentence is a virtual certainty if he is convicted, Callen reiterated. A sentence of 10 to 20 years if convicted is likely. Currently, there are no talks of Diddy negotiating a plea deal. However, there is a chance for that to change. Most serious charges negotiate a plea deal rather than risking a harsher sentence after trial. He is likely to do the same, the lawyer told us. Of course, much will depend upon the prosecutor's willingness to negotiate. So far they appear to have a strong case and don't appear to be in the mood to extend leniency. He is, of course, presumed innocent but will have a difficult time explaining his girlfriend, Cassie Ventura, in a California hotel hallway preserved on videotape for all to see. Callen was referring to the resurfaced 2016 video of Diddy allegedly assaulting Ventura, now 37, in a hotel. The security footage was released by CNN in May, and Diddy can reportedly be seen grabbing, shoving, dragging and kicking the singer while she was attempting to exit a hotel room. After the clip made headlines, Diddy released an apology video. "It's difficult to reflect on the darkest times in your life. Sometimes you gotta do that," Diddy said in a May Instagram video. "I was fed up. I mean, I hit rock bottom, but I make no excuses. My behavior on that video is inexcusable. I take full responsibility for my actions in that video. I'm disgusted. Damian Williams, the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York who brought the indictment, was vague when asked whether Diddy or others could face more charges. I can't take anything off the table. Anything is possible, he said. Our investigation is very active and ongoing, and I think a lot of you who cover this office know that when we say such things, that developments are certainly foreseeable, but I cannot predict them sitting here today. Multiple witnesses who have worked for Combs have been meeting with prosecutors, a source familiar with the federal investigation told CNN. At least one male sex worker is expected to testify in front of the grand jury in coming days, according to the source, who added the witnesses' allegations go beyond the details in this week's indictment. Prosecutors have previously said they have interviewed over 50 victims and witnesses in the case. CNN spoke to several legal experts to try to understand what lies ahead for Combs and for those in his orbit. The experts do not expect a plea deal for the music mogul, noting the accusations against him could expand further. I will be very curious, especially since he's being held without bail, if that gives other survivors the courage to come forward, said Shay Rhodes, director of the Villanova Law Institute to address commercial sexual exploitation. As for the people alleged to be part of Combs' criminal enterprise, experts highlighted the prosecution's difficult questions on whether to charge them or get them to testify against him. The prosecution is going to have to deal with witnesses with a rough past or who are admitting to engaging in criminal activity, said trial attorney Misty Maris. You've got a lot of people with dirty hands in a racketeering case. What's next for Combs? The path ahead for Combs was set in motion by a series of legal decisions the past few days. Combs, 54, pleaded not guilty Tuesday to federal charges of racketeering conspiracy, sex trafficking and transportation to engage in prostitution. The indictment alleges he abused, threatened, and coerced women and others around him to fulfill his sexual desires, protect his reputation, and conceal his conduct. It also states that he formed a criminal enterprise that engaged in sex trafficking, forced labor, kidnapping, arson, bribery, and obstruction of justice. He faces a sentence of up to life in prison if convicted of the racketeering conspiracy charge. The sex trafficking charge comes with a statutory minimum of 15 years. He will remain in federal custody ahead of his trial after his lawyers failed Wednesday in their appeal of a judge's decision denying him bail. In his ruling, Judge Andrew Carter said there were no conditions that reduced the risk of witness tampering or obstruction. While many federal cases result in plea deals, Agnifilo said that's not likely between Combs and prosecutors here and said he planned to take the case to trial. I believe he's innocent of the charges, and he is going to go to trial, and I believe he's going to win, he told CNN on Tuesday. Maris said a plea deal is unlikely in part because of the 15-year mandatory minimum sentence for the sex trafficking charge. I think what the defense is really saying is, okay, we're going to take it to trial because any plea deal would be unlikely to be so favorable, she said. We're talking about charges that carry a minimum of 15 years. The idea that a plea deal is going to be something that will have a not-so-severe punishment is just really not in the cards for this case. Further, Combs could potentially face more accusations of wrongdoing. Prosecutors have said the investigation remains active and ongoing. And they have issued a public call for any potential victims to reach out to authorities. It will be difficult for victims to come forward in this case, particularly given the allegations of violence for those who sought to speak out in the past, according to Rhodes. It's shame and fear of whether or not you're going to be believed. Also, if these allegations about how he had just really engaged his entire organization in covering up what was going on, who is not behind bars that can carry out additional intimidation tactics or instill additional fear in survivors who do want to come forward, she said. CNN senior legal analyst Ellie Honig noted the racketeering conspiracy charge is already so broad that it encompasses a host of different types of wrongdoing, including, according to the indictment, sex trafficking, forced labor, kidnapping, arson, bribery, and obstruction of justice. That said, new victims and witnesses could well lead to new charges, he added. What's next for those around him? The federal indictment against Combs alleges he was part of a sprawling conspiracy with staff, assistants, supervisors and associates to commit racketeering from 2008 until now. According to the indictment, the Combs enterprise consisted of Combs, the leader, business entities, including his record label Bad Boy Entertainment, and employees and associates, including security staff, household staff, personal assistants and high-ranking supervisors. Members and associates of the Combs enterprise engaged in, and attempted to engage in, among other activities, sex trafficking, forced labor, interstate transportation for purposes of prostitution, coercion and enticement to engage in prostitution, narcotics offenses, kidnapping, arson, bribery, and obstruction of justice, the indictment states. Despite those serious accusations, he is the only one facing charges. Several legal experts said the lack of charges for those around Combs indicated they may be cooperating with the prosecution. You have other people who you could say were his enablers, who are not being looked at by the government, who are looking at helping the government prove their case, said CNN legal analyst Joey Jackson. Prosecutors could choose to grant these alleged co-conspirators immunity or non-prosecution agreements to get them to testify against Combs, Maris said. The reason prosecutors would do that is because the target in this case is Diddy, Maris said. In order to have a rock-solid case against him, the information is necessary and the testimony is necessary. In addition, the lines between victim, witness and offender can be surprisingly blurry. Rhodes called this the victim-offender overlap, and noted it's particularly pronounced in sexual violence and sex trafficking cases. In Ghislaine Maxwell's sex trafficking case, for example, several of the women who testified as victims said they had also recruited others to join in the sexual encounters. Just because a prosecutor can charge someone as a co-conspirator, doesn't mean that they should, Rhodes said. Prosecutors could have charged one of those victims as a co-conspirator for recruiting, but that's not appropriate. Were some of Combs' alleged co-conspirators also victims of other violence? The Combs indictment indicates so, stating that one purpose of the criminal enterprise was securing absolute loyalty from members of the Combs enterprise, including through acts of violence and threats. The best guide for Combs' path ahead is to examine another recent racketeering case. Nadia Shahada, a former federal prosecutor who brought the racketeering case against the singer R. Kelly, told CNN there may or may not be others charged in Combs' case. Certainly, additional people could be charged. It's also possible that additional people have already been charged, pled guilty and are cooperating in the case, she said. The fact that it's a racketeering indictment that relies on an enterprise, though, doesn't necessarily mean there will be additional people charged. For example, in R. Kelly's case, which Shahada acknowledged had some key similarities to Diddy's, no one else was charged with racketeering. At trial, some of his former employees testified against him, including a general assistant and a tour manager. Kelly was ultimately found guilty. In general, prosecutors have the discretion to decide how wide to cast their net in racketeering cases, Honig said. You can decide to just charge everyone. Or you can decide to just aim for the top players here, he said. You can say, I'm gonna focus my resources and attention on the bosses, the heavy hitters, and not gonna weigh this indictment down with more peripheral players. CNN.
Than state prosecutions, and as I'll get to in a moment, that is certainly the case here. So this is a 3-count indictment against Sean Combs. Now, count 1 charges racketeering conspiracy, and the indictment alleges that Sean Combs, along with others who are not charged, but others, ran an enterprise, an operation, essentially a business that engaged in a series of crimes. Here, those crimes relate to sex trafficking. In fact, the indictment names...
As you come on to the page, kindly hit the like bell and subscribe to the channel, if you haven't done so as yet. And don't forget to put on your notification bell so you can be notified when I drop the next video. Thank you.
In fact, the indictment names the racketeering enterprise the Combs enterprise. That's the title that they gave the enterprise. So that's count 1. Now, count 2 charges sex trafficking by force, fraud, or coercion, meaning that Sean Combs participated in transporting women across state lines for illegal sexual purposes by force or by threats or by intimidation. That is an extraordinarily serious charge. If the prosecution can prove that, the minimum sentence there, if they convict Sean Combs on that, is 15 years, and the maximum is life. 15-year minimum sentence. And then count 3 charges transportation of another individual to engage in prostitution. It's sort of a lesser included of count 2. So we've got a 3-count indictment, racketeering, sex trafficking by force, and then interstate transportation for the purpose of prostitution. It's a very serious indictment. These charges are extremely serious. The Southern District of New York does cases like this. They do cases against powerful, famous individuals all the time, and soon Sean Combs will be in court, and he will certainly plead not guilty to this, and then we'll be underway with the proceedings.
As you leave the page, don't forget to hit the like bell and subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching.